Welcome back to Change Ed.
Change Ed.
Your number one educational podcast from the location that you are we're broadcasting from, which is, and we're back.
We are back.
The P&C Conference. P&C being the Pennsylvania Educational Technology Expo and Conference.
Good job
Conference.
reading that.
Yeah, good thing I took the lanyard off of my neck so I could read it.
True story.
Hashtag facts.
Oh
So we're back, and we learned lessons from last time.
Kind of.
Not
It's
to
still kind
do
of
22 episodes in 2 days. So,
It's a growth mindset.
so we decided we were going to bring in big hitters like our guests. But before we get there, I'm Andrew Kuhn, your favorite host of Change Ed. I'm an education consultant from Montgomery County Intermediate Unit. And here with me is
Patrice Semachek, the actual favorite. Like, we determined that a
questionable.
year ago. We're still living into it.
we can ask Tony.
Tony?
And Tony Marabito, SDF.
You staying out of it?
CLIU 21.
Did you just blank out? Like
Are
we
you
were just
staying
talking
out of it?
about you in front of you, and
I
you
did.
just introduced yourself.
I did.
Stayed out
And
of
What just happened?
He stayed out of it.
if this drops on Monday, I just want to say go Birds.
I feel like we got a long time to live into the bird situation.
We
so.
do. I also want to point out Andrew's mic.
Yeah, please.
Seems like you're compensating, but it is nice, and it is great to be back at Pete.
Well, we were the number one family radio show.
Are we going to talk about how it's compensating? We're just going to leave it up to the
We'll
listener.
leave it up.
Okay, love it.
For our listeners, I have a boom mic because
He's the host.
because I'm the host, and because of our fans, they want to hear more of Andrew.
No, they don't. They've written it and said, take him out.
Let's get to our guest. Very good friend of all of ours, a good friend of Pennsylvania education in general. The one, the only, no other than Dr. Demetrius Roberts. Welcome.
Oh my gosh, I couldn't be more excited to be on this podcast right now. I mean, here with you all, I'm in Chocolate City.
Day after the
I
Eagles
feel
win.
like I got doused with Gatorade from winning the Super Bowl. Like I was there, like I participated, I'm tired from the event, celebrating, and I couldn't think of a better way to follow up how I'm feeling right now than
to
being
spend your
here
morning.
with you all and Andrew's big microphone.
Depending how this goes, you might get doused again in Gatorade tonight.
Oh my
I
God.
already spilled my water all over the table, all over the electronics.
Good day.
Yes, feeling
Good
great.
day.
So let me ask you this, Demetrius. When we think about the Super Bowl, since you brought it up, Super Bowl yesterday, what does something like that look like in education? Are there moments where we have like Super Bowl moments where like we did it, like we conquered, or the teacher gets doused proverbially, figuratively, not literally? Oh, what a mess this
Go
podcast
back to school.
Go back to school. Where the teacher gets doused with the Gatorade. Are there moments like that in education?
I don't know if we've had a moment like that in recent past. I do think when I get excited at the Super Bowl, I like to listen to the players, how they talk about what it took. And last night, I was just so impressed that players kept echoing this phrase. It sounds like it's coming straight from the coach, which is, you can't be great without the greatness of others.
Yep.
And I think that applies. Like we can take a lesson learned from that Super Bowl victory, regardless of whatever team you're voting for, whatever. Like just somebody who's won, that's put in the time with the work, and you see everyone's on the same page. They're moving the ship all in one direction, and I think that's my hope for education. Like, sometimes within the education community, we don't always have the same vision. We don't always use the same language. We get called on buzzwords, and then we each have our different interpretation of the buzzword. But you look at a successful team like that Super Bowl team, they're all saying the same thing. They mean it all the same way. And I think that we can take that into what we do in education for sure.
Speaking of hard work, I know you wear many, many hats, but where did you start? What was your career like to where you are now? And then talk about just some of your titles, because then we'll get into it a little bit more after that.
So, I guess I'll start with the title. I'm really proud of this opportunity I have to make an impact in Pennsylvania as working with the Department of Education. And right now I'm the point of contact and a special consultant for STEM and computer science. I get to work closely with the PA Smart initiative and many projects that come out of it. We all know there's the grant projects, but there's a lot of side projects and programs I'm proud to support and lead for the state within that work. And where it all started for me is my high school experience in Philadelphia. So urban setting that gives me one kind of dynamic. I got to interact with lots of different people. So I got to see how a lot of different people live, from my friends who had big single family homes, certain parts of the city, to my friends who grew up in Section 8 housing. So just a range of wealth to poverty, race, gender, color, all the different things. So I feel like I understand people. For me, it started going to a CTE school. So I didn't have a traditional high school experience. I knew I wanted to be a teacher at some point. So I go to school and do the whole teacher thing that we all do. And then when I become a secondary teacher, actually in social studies, my first year teaching in high school was my first time teaching or being in a high school setting, like in school all day. For me, high school was do some classes in the morning, and then in the afternoon, we're making something. Right?
Yeah.
We're building a house.
Yeah.
Right? I'm using what I learned in geometry to do the plumbing.
Yeah.
I did plumbing as a CTE trade in my day. So I'm using the geometry. I'm using the science of how water works. I was able to apply what I was learning. So when I became a teacher in a regular school, I had empathy for the kids. I was like, I would be bored. You just go to class to class to class. And like you're sitting in rows and you just do these assignments. I was like, oh, that seems terrible. Like we got to make some stuff. We got to do some stuff. And a pivotal moment for me was like the 250th anniversary of maybe signing of the Articles of Confederation, teaching U.S. history. And I went to have the kids to do the math to figure out like 250th year. So I'm like, all right, I used to want to be a math teacher. So I found myself working in some math standards. I'm going to get a math standard in today. And I do this warm-up activity. And the question was like, how long ago was the Articles of Confederation signed? It was on this date, and I gave him the date, right? And it was the actual date that day. So this really needed to do the year. So we do the activity. A couple of kids' hands go up. They're excited. I'm excited. The kids are participating. They're engaged. Point to the first student, and she's like 47. And I was like, okay. All right, that's good effort, but not quite. Like, let's keep working on it. So I ended up popping around with like 3, 4, 5 kids in high school that were struggling with the basic, 2000 and whatever it is, 2007 minus 1787 or whatever it was. And that day I went to the math teacher and she was like, yeah, I'm struggling. Like, it's a struggle. And I was like, we got to work together.
Yeah.
I don't care if I teach social studies. Like, I can do math standards. I bet they're struggling in English. Yep. And so from that moment forth, I took my CTE experience of wanting to build, make, do. How do I do that in social studies? All right, we're going to build, make, do. We're going to write letters to Congress people. You can make a play. You can do something, right? You can make a song, make a rap lyric, record it. Which, by the way, this whole podcast takes me back to my recording days with my studio, my students I used to have. But long story short, that CTE experience and that experience of, wow, like my students were struggling in other areas, not just history. So I felt the need to do some cross-curricular learning. And fast forward, that becomes STEM. Fast forward, I go to school, I go back for distance learning, instructional technology. And now I'm learning these online learning principles, these other instructional strategies, how I can be more efficient, how I can flip learning so that we can do more in the class. And I have this build momentum, and I'm a young teacher. I'm presenting to my colleagues about what's going on, lessons learned, and I find my way to an intermediate unit where I get to do that all the time. And it's been amazing just working with other intermediate units, doing good work on the stage that the department took notice when a position was open and having an opportunity. They asked if I want to come and support. And so it's just been an amazing career journey, not like I would have foreseen it, but for me, chasing that impact, like that moment where my kids were struggling, like I want every student, every teacher to be able to do what it takes, connect all the dots, and do meaningful teaching and learning for students. So that's where I'm at.
So Demetrius, with that background and with everything you just shared, what I'm thinking about as you're talking is I would love to hear about your lens with which you're seeing things now. And I say that because, I had the lens of an educator and I saw things from the classroom and how it was working. had that perspective. And then when I switched to the IU, it changed my perspective because now I'm working with multiple school districts and multiple non-public schools. And so I saw education from a completely different perspective. I'm imagining that perspective you could see even farther than we can. And, you're talking about the entire state, not just county or an IU. I'm curious on some of the things that you're seeing or that perspective of that lens.
No, thank you. That's a really good question. I just want to point out, I think having an opportunity to think about that, right? Like the Maslow's hierarchy, right? So because I don't have, everyday students I'm thinking about, because I don't have an everyday building I'm thinking about, because I'm in this fortunate position to be working for the state, it does lend me ability to have a little lens kind of across the landscape. And I think my thing that I'm stuck on right now is I think that we are so rich in technology. We're rich in instructional strategies. Like, I think there's so much out there that we can do, with the games, the tools, like it's all out there. Every school is diving in a little bit differently. And what I kind of see across the board is that you got to narrow the focus. And I think sometimes we're arguing about the margins of what it means to narrow that focus. So we get caught in this battle. Probably should have teachers just focus on in a given school, like, these are the 8 technologies you're using. Yep. But like everyone likes the different tools. Yep. The data systems aren't always operable. So like it's hard to get to that data-driven kind of mindset universally across education. All of our schools are at a different placing. We're seeing in Pennsylvania, we look at subcategories of our students when it comes to our state testing. So we're looking at them by, race, gender, economics, how students, IPs, how students are performing in these subgroups. We're seeing that as a challenge across the state. Certain subgroups, different areas are struggling. I think just so much that you have to take on as a classroom teacher, how to get there, who makes the call for what simplification looks like and bringing all the dots together. I don't have the solutions. Some of the work that we're doing across the state is there to support, but ultimately in Pennsylvania, it's local control. So it has to be supporting schools moving forward, and they make those critical decisions. And I think it's happening. But technology is moving so fast at the same time, too. And I think our systems are struggling to keep up with the speed and the pace of change with what's available to everyone.
I think one of the gifts of this podcast is that we're able to have these great conversations, but also share with educators that there is a whole system support that's all working towards the bettering education and providing better pathways in. Again, I remember for me as an educator, a decision would come along and you would think, what idiot made this decision, right? And really the reality is that there's a whole line of people that just finally landed at that last spot. And so for me, this is part of that mission of like, how do we share that? So we know it's like, it's not just one person who made this decision. There's a whole line of factors that come into play. A lot of what I'm hearing is about engagement. How do we engage learners so that they're active participants, not just passive?
Can I just say one thing? You said that what idiot is making this decision? Having worked in the state-ish level for gifted, it's not about, because of what you said, Dee, everybody's at different spots across the state. Making a decision kind of like, you have to make what's in the middle, right? What's the median decision that's going to make the most impact? Yeah. Some districts are going to be farther ahead of it, and some districts are going to be farther behind it and are going to need more support. So I think that's a misconception that sometimes we have if we're not in the system to know, like, especially in Pennsylvania with so much local control, the decisions that are being made at a state level are the ones that are the best for the most in the middle, which may or may not be the best decision all of the time. But I think sometimes we forget that. So I don't mean to like push back on your thought or whatever, but I think it's important to know that when we're making decisions, and I don't make as many decisions as you do, or the people at PDE, like the conversation is, where am I going to make the most impact for the most people?
Yeah, and I think it's a really good point, Patrice, because like some people say, oh, PDE is making decisions, but like it's a big system. Like, it's the beauty of our country.
Huge state too.
The beauty of our country is we have this complex system, right? We have, 3 branches. Now, don't get me pull out my social studies hat now. 3 branches. Like, I've been having to educate people about how governing is supposed to work. The roles, like
not that
what
kind
the
of
president
podcast.
does, what the legislation does.
Not that kind of podcast.
No, but where I'm going with it is that, the legislative body makes the laws, right? PDE's job is to support the execution of how we're supposed to follow the rules of those laws. So
oftentimes the people making the rules don't know about the system.
Or they're making the rules. The legislators, and I give them all the respect in the world. I think it's a hard job, really hard job. You're fighting for your community, but it's a big system. They're making laws. They're basing it off data. Like, I know that they interact with superintendents who are helping. They interact with other bodies who help, provide them with the best information about what's happening. They make a law. PDE has to interpret that law, and that law has to get carried out by all the school districts, and then that impacts administrators and teachers. So I just give kudos. It's a big system. And I think for educators listening on, I think the trap is like getting caught up and all those things that you don't have control over. I'm going to use a Super Bowl line. I think that's going to be my thing right now. I'm going to use a Jalen Hurts line. I think as an educator, I think that the main thing is just keep the main thing, which is students. Yeah. And I know that's like a broad statement, but, if we're just focusing on doing good things for kids, right, every day, building your craft, working on your routines, all right, working on your structures, your engagement structures, get the movement involved, differentiation, those basic everyday skills of a teacher. That's your controllables, right? We don't impact the law, right? Your superintendent doesn't necessarily impact the law. They may try to influence, but going back to those big decisions, as an educator, you don't have control over those things. So spending your brain energy around emotionally being mad at them, upset, or whatever it may be, it's not the role. I mean, that's not my role either, right? I don't make the laws. My role is how to support people in that environment. How can we get the right professional learning, the right training, the right supports, money for resources to be able to carry out the vision of our laws the best way possible.
I would like to take a moment to clarify my idiot comment.
No, I know what you're saying.
Well, what I meant was I didn't realize it was larger than the local decisions that were being made. So locally, it was like, that's where it was like, what idiot decided this made sense? Yeah. And I guess my point is that like there's that bigger system that I just didn't realize, right? When I applied for the IU position, they said, well, tell us what are some of the PDE initiatives you're a part of. I'm like, I have no idea. Yeah. Here's what I'm doing.
I do STEM.
Well,
he still got the job.
It was him and one other person.
This is my first day teaching. I don't know what you want from me.
Some other IU took the other person.
Yeah.
I think it was.
Sorry.
So
that was perfect.
No, but in that conversation, then I said, well, here are all the things. I'm part of CSI. I'm doing this. But we didn't call them those. Like the initiatives didn't have the same name at the local level. Yeah. So again, that's where there's like that. What could be that breakdown? As you're saying, like, what's the main thing? If we're all saying this is the main thing and we're agreeing on that, that changes the whole conversation. Yeah. Versus saying over here, this is what we care about most. Sure. And I'm even going to tie back to what you're saying about the technology. Yeah. Like, a lot of technology is technology, right? Like we should be human focused and technology infused, not technology focused and human infused. Yeah. And when we flip them, that's when it's like I feel like we can lose sight on like the engagement part. While they were engaged, while they were using technology, were they actually learning or were they just using technology? Which I don't know where I'm going this, other than I felt inspired to say it in front of you all.
Sorry. I didn't mean to call you out. I just wanted to clarify, like not knowing the system and the way that it works, it does impact our potential outcomes too.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I'm emoting is like it was my ignorance.
Yeah,
I didn't know.
Sure.
I know that Tony still doesn't know, so I'm trying to help others.
So change this up a little bit.
Thank you, Tony.
I love that you talked about your CTE experience. Yeah. Because without that experience, I don't think you bring in that make do into your classroom, right? And I think
Especially as a social studies teacher.
Correct.
That's kind of uncommon.
And going cross-curricular, because usually high school teachers want to stay in their silos. I'm very much elementary background. We work together all the time. Kids come in and 99% of the time they want to learn, but you lose that love of learning a little bit in high school. But the fact that you had that CTE afterwards, I wish more kids could experience that.
Yeah, I mean, I was a little fortunate. Like, you know, there's no social studies test. There's no social studies keystone.
That's awesome.
So I think without that pressure,
that came from someone that works at the state.
You know, I can admit as a social studies teacher, without that pressure, I felt a sense of flexibility, but also a sense of duty to support.
Yeah.
You know, that it was our school's score, right? And I love math, and I love the art of language and writing, and so it was really a pleasure to try to figure out how to make those connections. And again, keeping the main thing, it came from a place of, I want my students to have an amazing learning experience, amazing experience in school as much as possible. Yeah. No one's perfect. I didn't do that every day. You know, I had bomb days. I had days that you know, the Eagles won, you know, was in the Super Bowl the day before and I had to just get through the next day. I had those days. But I think that's the effort, right? Yeah. That's the goal, is to try to create those amazing experiences. Yes, you know, you might be using technology. Yeah, you may be doing these things. And that's why I just encourage educators. Yeah, there's some tips and tricks. Like, you know, I'm a routines freak, instructional routines and strategies. That way kids know what to expect so that they can focus on the learning, not focus on the process and procedures. Like, you can geek out with some of the nuances of what that looks like, how to build it out, how to build lessons those ways. But I just encourage people to, you know, if they're feeling whatever pressure, struggling, frustration in the classroom, we just want to be an encouragement to people that, you know, one kid, impacting one kid a day, one kid a week, you know, to me, it's all worth it, because you never know what a kid's going home to. It might be a spark that day.
Demetrius, because I'm such a big fan of yours, I'm going to give you the second to last final thought on the show. Is there anything that you'd like to add? Anything you want to say that you didn't get to share with our audience?
Yeah, my final thought here is just teachers, educators, be encouraged. You do make a difference.
Yeah.
You make a difference every day, even if it's one kid. I encourage you to keep it going. I encourage you to find those opportunities, not just in the classroom, but as a kid the reason why I wanted to become an educator wasn't just the stuff in the classroom. It was my experiences with my teachers outside of the classroom. So in sports, in clubs, in tutoring. So I encourage you to stay involved in kids' lives. You make a big difference. You make an impact. And if you're doing that, you're a great educator.
Love that.
I don't think you have anything left to say there, Andrew. It's tough to follow.
But he's going to.
He actually read my notes. It's everything I read. How dare you, Demetrius?
The end. Really? This will be a first. Nope.
Make sure that you follow.
I'm very uncomfortable.
Our podcast, Change Ed, and share it with all of your friends. You want to say something else?
No.
No, that's good.
Weird, though.